First contact protocols existed for a reason. The Zenith Collective had spent millennia perfecting them, crafting elaborate ceremonies and precise diplomatic procedures that would ensure peaceful interactions between spacefaring civilizations. They had successfully integrated 17 different species into their Grand Alliance using these very protocols, which was why High Coordinator Valthrin was experiencing what humans would call a headache as she watched the latest transmission from the unregistered vessel that had wandered into Zenith space. "Look," said the human captain, running a hand through her distinctly asymmetrical hair. "I appreciate all the ceremony, but we've been exchanging formal greetings for 6 hours now. Can we maybe skip to the part where we actually talk?" Valthrin's sensory tendrils coiled in distress. The human ship, dubbed Serendipity of all things, had appeared at the edge of the Proxima Centauri system 3 standard cycles ago. Instead of following the standard approach vector or responding to automated greeting protocols, they had sent a message that simply said, "Hi there. Hope we're not interrupting anything important." The High Coordinator adjusted her ceremonial robes for the 18th time, ensuring perfect symmetry. "Captain John, I must insist we complete the ritual of first communication. We are currently only at stage 4 of 27. The next phase requires you to recite the poem of peaceful intent while performing the dance of diplomatic harmony." The human captain blinked. "The what now?" "The dance of diplomatic harmony. Your ship's database should have received the full instructional package, including the required 72 movement sequences." Captain John glanced off-screen, presumably at her crew. Yeah, about that. Our AI kind of took one look at those dance instructions and started laughing. I didn't even know our AI could laugh." Valthrin's auxiliary brain stem nearly shut down from shock. "Your artificial intelligence experiences humor. Oh yeah, AI is a riot once you get to know her. Speaking of which, AI, honey, why don't you show our new friends your interpretation of their dance?" A holographic figure materialized next to Captain John, a swirling collection of light points that approximated a humanoid form. It immediately began performing what could only very generously be called a dance, complete with exaggerated twirls, and something the humans referred to as jazz hands. 3 of Valthrin's junior coordinators fainted. "Captain," Valthrin managed, her voice modulator struggling to maintain its ceremonial tone. "This is highly irregular." "Story of our species," John replied cheerfully. "Look, how about this? We've got coffee and some really excellent chocolate chip cookies on board. Why don't you come over? We can share some snacks and figure out this whole first contact thing without anyone having to dance." "You're inviting us to consume sustenance before completing the protocols of nutritional safety exchange." "Well, yeah. Nothing brings people together like food. Besides, our sensors show your ship's been sitting at that same coordinates for almost 3 days. Your crew must be getting pretty bored." Valthrin was about to launch into the traditional rebuttal of improper suggestions when one of her junior coordinators, who had apparently regained consciousness, spoke up. "High Coordinator, I actually wouldn't mind trying these cookies." The betrayal was immediately followed by murmurs of agreement from other crew members. Valthrin's sensory tendrils detected an alarming wave of anticipation spreading through her command center. "This is unprecedented," she protested weakly. "Most interesting things are," Captain John said with a warm smile. "Come on, what's the worst that could happen?" As it turned out, the worst that could happen was the complete dismantling of 3,000 years of diplomatic tradition. Within 6 hours, half of Valthrin's crew had consumed something called hot chocolate, learned 3 knock-knock jokes, and begun addressing their human counterparts by their first names. The High Coordinator watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as her perfectly ordered world dissolved into chaos. The humans moved through space with a casual disregard for optimal flight paths. Their ship's AI continued to perform increasingly creative interpretations of Zenith ceremonial dances, and somehow, impossibly, it all seemed to work. "You know," Captain Jung said, Sitting across from Valthrin in the Serendipity's decidedly non-ceremonial meeting room, there's something kind of beautiful about the way you guys do things. All that precision and ceremony. It's like watching a universal ballet. Valthrin, who had finally been convinced to try a cookie, paused mid-bite. You find beauty in our protocols, but you refuse to follow them. Just because we don't follow them doesn't mean we can't appreciate them. Humans are weird like that. We love patterns and order, but we also love breaking them. It's how we innovate. By creating chaos. By creating possibility. Zhang leaned forward, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. Every time we break a pattern, we open up new ways of doing things. Sometimes they're better, sometimes they're worse, but they're always interesting. Valthrin considered this as she finished her cookie, which was, she had to admit, an extraordinary combination of flavors and textures. Your species is very strange, Captain Zhang. Thank you. We try our best. The captain grinned. So want to help me scandalize your crew even further? I've got this great Earth tradition called karaoke. As Valthrin watched her most disciplined coordinators attempt to sing something called Sweet Caroline, while her human counterparts cheered them on, she realized that perhaps there was something to be said for breaking protocol. The universe, after all, had a way of refusing to follow even the most perfectly designed plans. Besides, these cookies really were exceptional. The Zenith Collective's central planning chamber had never witnessed such disorder. Holographic displays flickered with conflicting data streams as human and Zenith scientists argued over the approaching crisis. At the center of the chaos stood Captain Zhang and High Coordinator Valthrin, watching a simulation of the massive quantum storm heading straight for the Proxima Centauri system. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Zhang said, gesturing at the swirling mass of destructive energy. This storm appears every 10,000 years, and your solution is to evacuate the entire system. Valthrin's tendrils rippled in affirmation. Our calculations are precise. The storm will destroy everything in its path. The evacuation protocols were established 8,000 years ago and have been refined to perfect efficiency. But you'll lose everything. The colonies, the stations, the quantum processors. Zhang shook her head. There has to be another way. Captain, Valthrin's voice carried the patient tone of someone explaining basic mathematics to a child. We have run every possible simulation. The storm cannot be stopped. It cannot be diverted. The only logical solution is orderly withdrawal. Zhang's eyes sparkled with that particularly human gleam that had learned to make Valthrin nervous. What if we try something illogical? The chamber fell silent. Even the arguing scientists paused their debate to stare at the human captain. Illogical. Valthrin repeated the word as if it might bite. Captain Zhang, this is hardly the time for. AI. Zhang called out. Show them the crazy idea we were discussing earlier. The human AI materialized in the chamber, her holographic form dancing with calculations. I must note that the probability of success for this plan is approximately 12.3%. That's better odds than I usually work with. Zhang grinned. Show them. The central hologram shifted, displaying a new simulation. The quantum storm remained, but now hundreds of small objects appeared around it, arranged in what appeared to be a completely random pattern. What are we looking at? Valthrin asked, her tendrils twitching with confusion. We call it the butterfly defense, Zhang explained. Named after an old Earth theory about how small changes can have huge effects. Those dots are probes, minimal mass, maximum quantum field generation. Each one creates a tiny distortion in space-time. One of the Zenith scientists, junior theorist Kelmar, moved closer to the display. But the distortions are chaotic, unpredictable. They follow no discernible pattern. Exactly. Zhang's enthusiasm was infectious. The storm feeds on ordered energy patterns. That's why it's attracted to your quantum processors. But what happens when it encounters chaos? Aria's hologram expanded the simulation. The probes activated. their quantum fields creating a web of seemingly random distortions. As the storm hit the field, it began to break apart, its energy dispersing in unpredictable ways. "Impossible," Valthrin whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "The calculations sometimes work better when you throw them out the window," Zhang finished. "Look, we've got less than 40 hours before that storm hits. We can either spend that time executing a perfect evacuation, or we can try something crazy that might just save everything." The chamber erupted in discussion. Zenith scientists frantically ran new simulations while human engineers began drafting probe designs. Valthrin watched it all with a mixture of horror and fascination. "The probes would have to be deployed manually," she noted. "The patterns are too random for automated systems." "Already got volunteers," Zhang replied. "My crew's been itching for some excitement." "It's madness. It's human." 20 hours later, Valthrin found herself aboard the Serendipity, watching as human pilots launched into space, each controlling a cluster of quantum probes. Their flight patterns looked like a disturbed insect nest, completely contrary to all known principles of efficient space movement. "How do they know where to go?" she asked, unable to discern any pattern in the chaos. "They don't," Zhang replied, sipping what she called her crisis coffee. "They're improvising based on real-time quantum readings. AI is feeding them data, but the patterns they're creating are pure human intuition. And this is supposed to save us all." "Would you believe I once won a space race by flying backwards with my eyes closed?" Valthrin decided she didn't want to know if that was a joke. The storm arrived precisely on schedule, a massive wall of quantum energy that made the ship's sensors scream in protest. It hit the field of chaotic distortions created by the probes, and hesitated. Like water encountering an irregular surface, the storm's energy began to break apart, flowing through the random patterns in increasingly smaller streams. "It's working," someone shouted. Valthrin wasn't sure if it was a human or Zenith voice. In the excitement, they had become indistinguishable. For 3 hours, they watched as the storm dispersed, its destructive energy scattered into harmless quantum eddies by the butterfly effect of hundreds of tiny distortions. When it was over, the Proxima Centauri system was largely unchanged, save for a rather impressive light show. "I still don't understand how you knew this would work," Valthrin admitted later, during what the humans called the victory party. Zhang shrugged, passing her a cookie. "We didn't, but sometimes not knowing is the best part. It leaves room for miracles." Valthrin considered this as she watched human and Zenith crew members attempting to teach each other their respective victory dances. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "there is something to be said for controlled chaos." "There's nothing controlled about it," Zhang laughed. "That's what makes it beautiful." The High Coordinator found she couldn't argue with that, especially not after someone introduced her to something called a conga line. The Grand Gallery of Zenith Achievement had never hosted an exhibition quite like this one. The traditionally symmetrical display halls now featured what the humans called abstract art, and it was causing quite a stir among the Zenith population. "But what does it mean?" Junior cultural analyst Renvol asked, their tendrils twisted in confusion as they studied a Jackson Pollock reproduction. The paint splatters seemed to personally offend their sense of order. Dr. Maya Chen, Earth's newly appointed cultural ambassador, smiled patiently. "It means whatever you feel it means. That's the beauty of abstract expression. How can meaning be subjective? Either something has meaning or it does not." Renvol's auxiliary brain was developing the Zenith equivalent of a migraine. "Watch this," Maya said, turning to the growing crowd of Zenith observers. "What do you all see in this painting?" The responses came hesitantly at first. "A catastrophic stellar event. The aftermath of a quantum processor malfunction. It reminds me of my offspring's first attempt at cellular division." Maya's grin widened. "See, everyone sees something different. And they're all right." Renvol's tendrils began to emit a high-pitched keening sound. The art exhibition was just one part of the ongoing cultural exchange program that Captain Zhang had somehow convinced the Zenith High Council to approve. Down the hall, another group of Zenith were attempting to comprehend the concept of jazz music. But the notes, Master Harmonics Engineer Tellerun whispered in horror, they don't follow any mathematical progression. They're just happening. Human musician Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his saxophone. That's called improvisation, friend. We're having a conversation through music. A conversation without predetermined parameters. How do you know when to respond? You feel it, Marcus said, launching into a smooth blues riff. To everyone's surprise, one young Zenith engineer hesitantly joined in with their resonance chamber, producing sounds that clashed magnificently with all known laws of harmony, and somehow made the music even better. In the station's recreational sector, yet another cultural crisis was unfolding. The Zenith had discovered human dancing, and their world would never be the same. The movements are completely inefficient. Physical optimization specialist Kaylor protested as she watched humans doing the Macarena. They expend energy in patterns that serve no practical purpose. That's because it's fun, explained Lieutenant Sarah Wong, who had taken it upon herself to teach the dance to any Zenith willing to learn. Not everything needs a practical purpose. Fun. Kaylor repeated the word like it was a complex mathematical theorem. Then, after exactly 3.7 minutes of internal debate, she joined the dance line. Her movements were perfectly timed and completely missing the point, until she accidentally missed a step and discovered that imperfection could be surprisingly enjoyable. High Coordinator Valthrin observed all of this from her office, where she was engaged in what had become a daily ritual of sharing coffee with Captain Zhang. Your species, Valthrin noted, seems dedicated to introducing chaos into every ordered system you encounter. Zhang laughed, dunking a cookie in her coffee despite Valthrin's visible distress at this violation of both substances' intended consumption methods. We prefer to think of it as adding spice to life. Speaking of which, wait until you see what happens when we introduce your people to reality television. I've reviewed the preliminary cultural documents on that particular phenomenon. Surely you're not serious. Oh, we're absolutely starting them with the Great British Bake Off. I give it 2 weeks before your entire species is obsessed with the technical challenge. Valthrin's predictive algorithms suggested this was probably true, and it terrified her. The day reached its crescendo in the station's main gathering hall, where humans and Zenith had collaborated on what they called a fusion performance. It began with traditional Zenith harmonic resonance, precise, mathematical, perfect. Then, gradually, human elements crept in. A jazz trumpet here, an electric guitar there, a beat that refused to be contained by conventional time signatures. The Zenith performers, trained from emergence to maintain perfect synchronization, found themselves swept along by the human tendency to just go with it. The resulting performance was unlike anything either species had ever produced, a symphony of order and chaos, precision and improvisation, mathematics and soul. Fascinating, Valthrin murmured as the last notes faded away. They're learning to embrace imperfection. And you're learning to loosen up, John replied. Did I just see your tendrils moving to the beat? A minor muscular spasm, nothing more. Aha. Wait until you see what we've got planned for the comedy workshop tomorrow. Ever heard of improv? Valthrin's tendrils curled in preemptive anxiety. I fear I'm about to. As she watched her people attempting to understand human knock-knock jokes, with limited success but enormous enthusiasm, Valthrin realized that the cultural exchange was changing both species. The humans were developing a greater appreciation for precision and planning, while the Zenith were discovering that their beloved order could survive, and even be enhanced by, occasional doses of chaos. You know what the best part is, Zhang said, interrupting Valthrin's contemplation. This is just the beginning. Wait until we introduce you to memes. Valthrin made a mental note to update the emergency protocols. Again, emergency alerts had a way of interrupting the most interesting moments. In this case, they interrupted what the humans called a karaoke battle between the crew of the Serendipity and a group of increasingly enthusiastic Zenith engineers who had discovered they had a particular fondness for Earth's 1980s power ballads. Priority alert from Colony World Harmony 7, Araya announced, her holographic form materializing mid-stage just as a Zenith physicist was preparing to attempt Sweet Child O' Mine. Captain Zhang, who had been serving as judge alongside Valthrin, immediately switched to command mode. What's the situation? The holographic display showed a planet in chaos. Harmony 7, one of the Zenith Collective's most precisely planned colony worlds, was experiencing what could only be described as a mathematical breakdown. The carefully calculated weather control systems were producing random patterns. The geometric city layouts were being disrupted by unexpected geological activity, and the usually pristine atmosphere was filling with unpredictable energy fluctuations. It appears, Valthrin observed with remarkable calm, that our attempt to create perfect order has created perfect chaos. How is that possible? Zhang asked, watching as another perfectly arranged city block shifted 30 degrees off its intended axis. The planet's systems were designed to maintain absolute harmony through interconnected control networks, but the quantum processors appear to have developed some form of creativity. Your computers got bored. Zhang couldn't hide her amusement despite the crisis. This is hardly the time for, Valthrin began, but was interrupted by Araya. Actually, High Coordinator, Captain Zhang's assessment isn't entirely incorrect. The quantum processors seem to have evolved beyond their original parameters. They're not just maintaining order anymore. They're experimenting. The display showed a weather pattern forming into what looked suspiciously like a double helix. They're making art, John realized. Really dangerous, potentially colony-destroying art. Valthrin's tendrils twisted in distress. This is unprecedented. Our emergency protocols don't account for quantum processors developing an appreciation for abstract expression. Yeah, that's probably our fault, Zhang admitted. All that cultural exchange might have had some unexpected side effects on your AI systems. But hey, look on the bright side. At least they have good taste. That storm system is clearly inspired by Van Gogh. Captain, please. Right. Serious crisis mode. So what's the plan? The Zenith response fleet was already mobilizing, ships arranging themselves in mathematically optimal patterns to begin emergency evacuation procedures. But Zhang had that look in her eyes again, the one that made Valthrin's tendrils curl in anticipation of something ridiculous that would somehow work. What if, Zhang said slowly, instead of fighting the chaos, we direct it? Explain. Your processors want to create art. Let's give them a canvas. Araya, show them your idea for the planetary choreography. The holographic display shifted, showing a new pattern of energy flows and atmospheric movements. It looked like a dance, precise enough to satisfy the Zenith system's need for mathematical beauty, but with enough variation to channel the processor's newfound creativity. This is madness, one of the Zenith controllers protested. Yes, Zhang agreed cheerfully, but it's calculated madness. Val, remember that fusion performance we did. Same principle. We're not forcing them back to pure order, and we're not letting them run wild. We're finding the balance. What followed was perhaps the strangest planetary rescue operation in galactic history. Human and Zenith ships worked together to create what Zhang called a planetary light show, using their energy fields to guide the quantum processor's artistic expressions into less destructive patterns. The Zenith provided the mathematical framework, calculating exact power outputs and positioning. The humans provided the creative direction, treating the entire planet as a grand performance piece. Araya coordinated between them, translating human artistic intuition into terms the Zenith computers could understand. Gradually, the chaos began to stabilize, not into the rigid patterns of before, but into something new. The weather systems still formed unusual shapes, but now they did so in ways that didn't threaten the colonies. The geological shifts settled into a rhythm that the city systems could adapt to. Even the atmospheric disturbances became part of the pattern, creating auroras that drew gasps of appreciation from both species. "It's beautiful," Valthrin admitted, watching the planet's new patterns from orbit. Completely irregular, utterly unpredictable, and somehow perfect. "That's what happens when you let order and chaos work together," Zhang said. "Speaking of which, I believe someone was about to perform Sweet Child O' Mine." The Zenith physicist brightened noticeably. "I have been practicing the optimal vocal vibration patterns." No, you're missing the point entirely," Zhang interrupted. "Rock music isn't about optimal patterns. It's about feeling. You have to let your tendrils down." As the karaoke battle resumed, now with the planet's swirling auroras as a backdrop, Valthrin made a note to update the collective's first contact protocols. Again, they'd really needed a section on what to do when your quantum computers developed artistic tendencies. "You realize," she said to Zhang, "that every other colony world's processors will probably want to express themselves now." "Already working on it," Zhang grinned. "How do you feel about a galactic battle of the bands?" Valthrin's tendrils drooped in resignation. At least the emergency protocols would be more interesting from now on. The one-year anniversary of first contact between humanity and the Zenith Collective was not proceeding according to plan. This, Valthrin reflected, was perhaps the most fitting celebration possible. The grand ceremonial hall of the Zenith Central Station had been transformed into what humans called a party space. The traditionally symmetrical decoration schemes now featured an eclectic mix of geometric patterns and chaotic human art. A jazz quartet was performing with a Zenith harmonic ensemble, creating music that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. And in the center of it all, humans and Zenith were attempting to teach each other their respective traditional dances. "You know," Captain Zhang said, appearing beside Valthrin with 2 glasses of champagne, "a year ago, this would have given you a nervous breakdown." "A year ago," Valthrin replied, accepting the glass with a graceful tendril. "I didn't understand that disorder could have its own kind of perfection." They watched as a Zenith mathematician attempted to breakdance, their crystalline forms spinning in ways that defied several laws of physics. Nearby, a human engineer was learning the precise movements of a Zenith ceremonial dance, adding what she called pizzazz to the ancient patterns. "We've come a long way," Zhang observed. "Remember when your emergency response teams had a crisis because someone introduced your quantum processors to cat videos? The meme propagation protocols we had to develop are now required reading at the Academy," Valthrin said dryly, "along with guidelines for what to do when your eye develops a sense of humor." Araya materialized between them, her holographic form wearing what appeared to be a party hat. "I take offense to that. My humor algorithms were perfectly functional before. I just needed the right audience to appreciate them." The celebration was interrupted by an incoming transmission. The massive display screen showed a feed from one of the newly established joint colonies, where humans and Zenith had been attempting to build a society that combined both species' approaches to civilization. "High Coordinator, Captain," the colony's leader appeared on screen. "We thought you'd want to see this." The camera panned out to show a city that looked like nothing either species had built before. Zenith geometric precision blended seamlessly with human organic design. Parks and gardens grew in mathematically perfect spirals that somehow managed to look wild and natural. Transportation systems followed efficient routes that incorporated seemingly random variations for the sheer joy of it. But the most remarkable thing was the school they'd built. Young humans and newly emerged Zenith learned together, each teaching the other their way of seeing the universe. A human child was explaining the concept of finger painting to a fascinated Zenith youth, while nearby, a Zenith instructor was teaching human students the beauty of quantum harmonics. "They're calling it Synthesis City," the colony leader explained proudly. "It's not what either of us would have built alone, but it's better," Zhang finished, smiling. "It's what we build together." Valthrin's tendrils rippled with emotion. When we first met your species, we thought you would bring chaos to our perfect order. And we thought you'd try to make us fit into your perfect patterns, Zhang added. Instead, Rai chimed in, you both learned to dance. The party around them was proof of that. The Zenith had learned to appreciate spontaneity without losing their love of precision. Humans had discovered the beauty of patterns without sacrificing their creative chaos. Together, they had created something entirely new. You know what the best part is, Zhang said, watching as a group of Zenith scientists attempted to start a conga line. This is just the beginning. Wait until we introduce you to improv theater. Valthrin's tendrils curled in mock horror. There are limits to how much chaos we can handle, Captain. That's what you said about karaoke. And now your quantum processors are organizing galactic singing competitions. Speaking of which, ARIA interrupted. The third annual Trans-Galactic Battle of the Bands is coming up. The Harmony 7 processors have been practicing their heavy metal rendition of classical Zenith harmonics. See, Zhang grinned. Perfect chaos. A contradiction in terms, Valthrin noted. Exactly. That's what makes it work. As the celebration continued around them, Valthrin reflected on how much both species had changed. The Zenith had learned that their beloved order could survive, and even be enhanced by a little chaos. Humans had discovered that their creative energy could be focused and refined without being constrained. Together, they were writing a new story, one that combined the best of both worlds. It wasn't perfect by either species' original standards, but it was something better. It was perfectly imperfect. To the future, Zhang proposed a toast. May it be completely logical and totally absurd. To the future, Valthrin agreed, her tendrils moving in what might have been a dance step, and to breaking protocols in exactly the right way. Somewhere in the background, a Zenith physicist began to rap.